All right. Welcome, everybody out there to the unDavos webinar series. My name is Robin. I'm the community coordinator on the unDavos core team, together with Mark and Dorothea. For those that are new to unDavos, unDavos is a community-driven unconference that runs in Davos alongside the World Economic Forum. And our purpose is to give everyone a stage to democratize, humanize, and also bring more action to Davos. Our new unDavos webinar series aims to continue the conversations between summits by keeping the pulse alive year-round through bite-sized, high-energy sessions where our community, meaning you, turn ideas into action. We recorded all the content from the 70+ panels during unDavos 2025 on YouTube and podcast. So we highly recommend you to check out all the incredible ideas that was shared there. Also follow us on LinkedIn and our Luma calendar for monthly updates as we journey together towards Davos 2026. I shared the links in the chat, so feel free to explore. As mentioned, unDavos is a community-driven summit, meaning we make ready the stage and you host the session. So if you want to host a session online, apply to host a webinar either by scanning this QR code or check the application link in the chat. And now for this session today, I have the pleasure to introduce the host that is going to take you through the next hour. Victoria Savitska, Epicenter Group Chief of Sustainability and Strategic Engagement, reveals how firms in war and disaster-hit regions can wield sustainability, powered by smart finance, digital tools, and policy agility, as a springboard for resilience, innovation, and lasting growth. Welcome to stage, Victoria.
Thank you, Robin. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our today's webinar, Beyond Crisis, Why Sustainability Matters the Most in Challenging Environments. Thank you very much, Robin, again for introduction, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss this very vital topic. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to our audience. I'm happy to see that we are all here from different backgrounds, from business, from government, from NGOs, and beyond. As someone who is working in this field, I am more than happy to see that we all got together here to discuss the very important question: can sustainability be more than a survival strategy in fragile environments, and instead become a driver of innovation, trust, and long-term value? I'm glad to be joined today with our three fantastic speakers, Marina and Benedetta. And I would like to tell you a little bit about each of them. So we have with us who is the founder of unCoram, advising company on ESG culture and resilience, including in conflict zones and fragile supply chains. Then we have Irina, Deputy Chairman at Epicenter Group, who is leading partnerships, communication, and sustainability in one of the largest Ukraine private ecosystems. And we have Benedetta, Business Development Manager from Studio Santi, designing renewable energy projects across sub-Saharan Africa in some of the most complex environments. Before we begin, I would like to just say a couple of housekeeping rules. The next hour will structure in a way that we will have 2 rounds of questions to our speakers. And then, of course, we will allocate some time for the questions from audience, because our goal is actually to have a discussion. And so feel free to drop a questions in the chat. Speakers are presenting, and then we can go directly to your questions. I'm not going to speak too much today, so I will cut it short and go directly to our discussion. And first question I have to Tim. In your work, you often emphasize that ESG isn't just about ticking boxes, which I agree 100%. In crisis-affected environments like war zones or refugee camps, how can companies move beyond compliance and use ESG as a tool for building trust, resilience, and long-term value creation? Please, Tim, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Victoria. And to answer that question, I've actually got a few slides to share, if that's okay, Victoria. We're,
Yes, please.
just to give some background on myself, firstly, it's a huge honor for me to be with you all today, and thank you for joining. Some background on me first, just so you know where I'm coming from on this. My background, I'm a chartered accountant, but I focus very much on the sustainability end of the spectrum, and I've worked with a number of mining businesses in conflict areas, in Ukraine, in Africa, around the world. For me, sustainability is personal. I've overcome some very deep challenges in life, and I've met people in various refugee camps who have fled war zones. I think the first point I'd say to answer this question is really that in a war zone with sustainability, it's less about the optics, it's more focused on continuity. Like, not how are we reporting this, it's are we still functioning? And that's where sustainability for me really is the infrastructure, the skeleton that keeps the business moving, keeps operations going, and even small acts. So even the procurement process, for example, can be an act of resilience as well as an act of defiance. The key thing I'd say here is focus on what will last, not what's visible. There's a lot of stuff with sustainability, a lot of activity that goes on hidden, unseen in the background. And it's that which will actually keep operations ticking over and moving out of compliance, but actually into what I call true resilience. A lot of people think, oh, it's all about the reporting. Actually, roads, ports, infrastructure may be at risk, but it's what's hidden that is the hardest to rebuild, the hardest to restore. Building trust in your data, the controls over your data. There was one business I was working with last year saying, with the war in Ukraine, why the hell are we still doing ESG? And I'd say, actually, this is bigger than that. This is about resilience and ensuring operational continuity. The things that tend to get missed, but actually are the lifeline to continuing operations, are things like whistleblowing, the audit trails, those hidden systems. And if you can't trust your numbers, you can't actually act on them. So how do we build trust in those numbers? And that's a lot of the work that I do. My next point really, you don't know how resilient you are until the crisis hits, until that pressure comes to your business. And underpinning all of this is your corporate culture. Culture really does eat policy for breakfast. It doesn't matter if you've got this edict coming out of the board saying, we will now do X, Y, Z. It's your culture that will really determine how you not just survive, but thrive through these crises. And that means transparency. It means showing up honestly, even when there's a slight reputational risk or you might lose some control. That transparency builds trust. That's really key there. And often in a conflict zone, communications can get disrupted. The key thing is that whoever's making the strategic decisions, they're listening to people on the front line who are actually enacting these strategies, these policies, these processes to actually get that direct feedback. If you wait for it to cascade up through the chain of command, quite often it can be too late. It's just not flexible enough for those situations. And my final point to answer this question is really focus less on compliance. Compliance, ticking the boxes, that's not going to move you forward. It may keep you safe, but it's your credibility that will actually build your resilience, and your resilience also builds your credibility. It's quite symbiotic in that way. And really, when you do sustainability well in these environments, it's being tested under pressure. It positions you well for when, God willing, the situation improves and things become a lot more stable. But most importantly, you have a ton of risks coming up against you in these war zones, be it supply chain issues, be it a threat of loss of life. Everything gets disrupted. The key thing is, it's not about how you mitigate and minimize those risks. It's actually about how you lead through them. When the pressure hits, this is the time that you lean in, you get on with it, and you keep on keeping on. It's not where you say, oh, okay, we need to deprioritize sustainability now, because actually this is the hidden infrastructure. I'll stop sharing slides at that point, but hopefully that addresses the question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tim. And what I like about our panel today is that actually all our speakers are very interlinked, and not only in what they're doing, but also somehow we have a smooth way from one region to another. And so you were mentioning sustainability today when we have the war in Ukraine. So actually we have a chance to hear firsthand from someone who is implementing sustainability in Ukraine during the war. And I will go to Irina now. Irina, Epicenter has remained committed to sustainability even in the current circumstances. So, could you share with us, please, how has Epicenter Group continued to implement sustainability initiatives? Because you're doing a lot of things from renewable energy to sustainable agriculture, and you're doing this during the war. And maybe you could share also a couple of words about what lessons can other businesses learn about staying committed to long-term goals in the face of short-term chaos. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you. A group of companies is Ukrainian leading channel ecosystem, integrating retail, agriculture, manufacturing, energy, and demining. I am a deputy chairman of company, and ESG is my passion. And let's to continue. At Epicenter, we believe that the sustainability must be integrated into the core of the business operations, especially during times of crisis. When the war escalated, many companies in Ukraine shifted to survival mode, but we took a different approach. We made a conscious decision not to pause, but to accelerate our sustainability agenda. Because in Ukraine today, sustainability is directly linked to resilience, energy security, and national recovery. Let me share how we now do that, even in a conflict-sensitive environment. Please, the next step. First, next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Renewable energy. We became the first major retail company in Ukraine to invest in solar energy on large scale. Across our retail, logistics, and manufacturing facilities, we have now installed over 20,000 solar panels, generating 15 megawatts of clean power. In some locations, this covers up to 30% of our energy needs, helping us to stay operational during blackouts and avoid dependency on the vulnerable national grid. But more than that, we have become active consumer and producer of solar energy. In fact, now we sell surplus solar energy back to the grid, which means we are contributing directly to Ukrainians' national energy system at a time that the country faces massive infrastructure challenges. It's not just about energy independence for us. It's about helping stabilize the entire system. The next step is sustainable agriculture. As I say, we have agriculture company inside our Epicenter group. Please, the next slide. Robin, can you help me? Oh, thanks. Our agriculture division, Epicenter Agro, continues to operate on over 167,000 hectares of farmland, despite the risks of war and landmines. Really, it's a hard time for us now, but we are here, we stay and work. We have maintained crop production while investing in soil health, water efficiency, and sustainable rotation practices. This isn't just good for yields, it's vital for national food security and rural economic stability. The next step is about waste management and circular construction. Next slide. We have significantly expanded our waste management and recycling systems. In our logistics and warehouse operations, we now sort and recycle packaging materials, plastics, and scrap. In construction, we have begun using recycling materials in our infrastructure projects. This reduces environmental impact and build a cultural reuse, even during reconstruction. Thank you, and please next slide. As the biggest retail chain in Ukraine, we have a lot of consumers, more than 6 million in our loyalty program. Sustainability shouldn't be something that only happens behind the scenes. We actually promote it to our millions of customers by offering a growing range of products made from recycled or eco-friendly materials. For example, furniture, home goods, gardening goods, and more. By integrating these products in our mainstream offer, not in separate green, we are helping to normalize sustainable choices and make them accessible to everyday consumers. That is an important shift, especially in a post-war economy where affordability and availability matter. Last but not least, environmental initiatives. Please, next slide. Environmental initiatives for community impact are a bonus. As a large company, we recycle over 110 tons of batteries and more than 20,000 tons of paper annually. Since 2019, we have started to out ultra-thin banks, introducing biodegradable options and awareness with the hashtag #ToBeTorbo reusable. In addition, we support reforestation, urban greening, and such a progressive eco project as Ukraine First Waste Exhibition. Partnerships with environmental organizations are extremely important to our activities, so we are always open to cooperation. Now, what we can offer learn from this. First, sustainability is not a peacetime project. It's a strategic asset that can protect your operations and contribute to national stability during disruption. Second, embed sustainability in the business model itself. Don't treat it as a separate department. Make it part of how you manage energy, build infrastructure, engage with communities, and design products. Third, leadership during crisis means choosing to act with a long-term lens, even when the short terms is volatile. We didn't wait for stability, especially now in Ukraine. We invest in it. And finally, sustainability is not good only for reputation. It creates tangible results: cost saving, energy security, operating resilience, customer trust, and even new renewable streams like solar energy feedback to the grid. In our case, these initiatives didn't just help Epicenter survive. They're helping us lead Ukrainians' economic and social recovery from the ground up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rina. That was very insightful. And it's always a pleasure to see how companies implement certain principles and lead by sustainability. And now I would suggest to go from local focus in Europe to maybe more global scale. And I invite Benedetta to take the floor. And Benedetta, because you're working in Sub-Saharan Africa a lot and you're actually working on more global scale, but always in regions where basic needs are urgent. So nobody, like many can think that sustainability is the last thing that people are thinking about when they have shortage of clean water or food security issues and so on. But please share with us, how can we bridge the gap between global sustainability frameworks and the everyday realities of communities in fragile environments, where survival needs often override long-term climate goals? Please, Benedetta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Victoria. Also, I wanted to thank you, Tim and Irina, for sharing their personal stories and companies. It was really interesting and exciting to see. Okay, so Robin, you can, then after that I introduce myself, you can go to slide 1 and slide 2 while I talk, because it's just to show a bit of the points of my discussion, but thanks. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Benedetta Giuliano. I am a business developer and I am a lawyer. I work for a company that is called Studio Santi. We are a technical engineering advisory firm. We advise on energy projects across Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. My experience is in energy in Sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, I lived in East and Southern Africa for the past almost 8 years of my life. So what I was asked to reply here in this session is how can we bridge the gap between global sustainability frameworks and the everyday realities of fragile environments and communities in these challenging economies and environment. It is like the experience that I want to bring here is a more practical one from this point, meaning that I think that before I or anyone can be able to reply to the question that Victoria asked, so how can we bridge the gap? I think we need to understand what the gap actually is, what it means. Because it's not just a gap between ambitions and actions as us in the first world, in Western countries are used to see, but it's a gap between frameworks and realities, as you can see also from the slide. We can give different definitions of sustainability. The definition that I like the most is where sustainability involves meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. So sustainability, I think that can be defined as like balancing environmental, social, and economic needs to ensure a future for both present and future generations. But this definition is a definition that I know from my experience being an Italian and living in Europe and seeing the sustainability movement rising since 1980s until 2005 and 2015, where we know that SDGs started becoming a thing, where the UN published their 17 interconnected global goals to tackle poverty, inequality, climate change, where what Tim was talking about, the ESGs, so the environmental, social, and governance frameworks, started becoming mandatory for companies to comply with global standards and for investors using it to address the impact of their investment. The countries I work in and with are actually very different from this. In Sub-Saharan Africa, what global sustainability frameworks mean not only doesn't apply, but doesn't really mean anything. When we talk about sustainability today, so the global frameworks that we have in mind, we know that they're essential tools. So they align countries, companies, institutions around shared goals. So as I was saying before, climate mitigation, resilience, inclusive development. But, and this is a thing that I learned living in East Africa, they come with built-in assumptions. They come with the assumptions that there are functioning institutions, that their regulations can be enforced. And even before that, there are regulations in place, that there is a data to track progress, that infrastructure is in place. And with infrastructure, we mean roads, grids, water systems, like basic infrastructures that, at least for me, that I was raised in, I grew up in Europe, was something obvious, that there is enough trained professionals to implement those policies. While if you look at the right side of the bridge that I tried to design in the first slide, there's nothing like this. So we have global agendas that emphasize carbon reduction, compliance reporting, corporate accountability, but in sub-Saharan African communities, the immediate concerns, the basic daily concerns are energy access, jobs, healthcare, food security. All of these take precedence. Just to keep giving context, especially like before I said that we saw in the Western world, in Europe, at least like in our experience, we saw the sustainability movement rising from since 1980s until the recent year, and it's still going on. If we look at the other side of the bridge from an historical point of view, we see that in those times, most of the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa were rebuilding themselves. While we were talking about ESGs, Mandela was liberated while South Africa started becoming a republic. Many of these countries started decolonizing themselves. So the process of decolonization was not only a tough historical moment, but it was challenging and very interesting because most of these countries became republics. Sub-Saharan Africa, just to give a couple of data, makes about 16% of the world's population. So we can imagine 8 billions living in the world and in Africa. And of these 400 million people below the extreme poverty line. And still, just to give an idea, the poverty line is counted as $2.5 per day per person. So this is really weird to see and to try to adapt to global sustainability frameworks. A thing that I'm also working in energy to give some other data is that the population growing rate is incredible. The population is super young. And there are countries that are really ready to go to the new phases of development. The thing is that there are no right tools there to be implemented. Over 600 million people in that region lack access to electricity. That probably one of the most, if not the most, challenging and scary crisis that we have right now, and that rarely we talk about. What I had in mind when Victoria and I were talking about this workshop was to show and to also brainstorm with my team, with Irina, with the people that are following us, about the roadblocks to sustainability. Because for me to bridge this gap, we need to understand the gap, and we need to try to understand altogether what is blocking this bridge to land on both sides and to be able to connect these two different worlds. The roadblocks are poverty and energy poverty, as I said before, the infrastructure gaps, climate shocks, because on this side of the world, sometimes we're still thinking and debating if climate change exists, while if you go on the other side of the world, regions that are among the least responsible for emissions, but the most affected. You have droughts, floods, crop failures, among a deep inequality. And these climate events are increasing year by year, and no one is doing anything because, as I said before, there are no tools. And among these roadblocks are the tools that we made up, that we invented, that we are applying and that entered into force in our side of the world, that we are trying to apply on the other side of the world, but it's not working. Applying these kind of tools, at least in my opinion, or like in our work, the work that we're doing in Sub-Saharan Africa, these tools do not fit. So instead of building with communities, sustainability often becomes something done to them, imposed. We tend to impose our priorities. We tend to impose our global agendas. And this happens not only in policy discussions, but mostly in foreign investments. So when you bring together stakeholders that want to bridge this gap and want to enhance sustainability in Sub-Saharan Africa, the tools that they implement and the way they structure their investments do not match with what's on the ground. Sometimes what we see is that even the basic cost of compliance is just too much. Applying ESG, sustainability reporting, certification as we intend this, it's too expensive. Or sometimes it's also irrelevant for local actors. We're not doing a good job in the dialogue. So for me, that is the basic of this discussion, and that is probably one of the answers on the question on how do we bridge this gap. So we should stop exporting sustainability, but we should co-create it. We should understand with the local population what's happening there and try to build with them, to write from scratch principles, new principles for a new approach. So that's why in this the last slide I wrote, we should reframe sustainability through local lenses, because that's exactly what's missing, and that's exactly what could really bridge the gap. At the heart of all of this, there is a cultural disconnection. Global frameworks overlook local indigenous knowledge, informal systems, and local realities in the wrong way. So instead of doing this to them, we need to build with Sub-Saharan Africa new sustainability frameworks. So this needs to be done from scratch. I just want to close this, and then I hope we can exchange a bit of ideas on what I just said, and also my colleagues before, with sharing with all of you a TEDx conference that I saw on YouTube a few years ago. I think it was made in around 2011, 2012, from an Italian book author. His name is Ernesto Sirolli, and he worked for several NGOs in Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa for sustainability projects, energy projects, and farming projects. And in this, I'll try to find the link and post it here so you can look at it. I found it super inspiring because what it says is, I think, a very important concept that we tend to forget, which is the first principle of sustainability should be respect for local needs, local knowledge, and indigenous people. He tells a story in this TEDx. I won't tell it entirely. It's gonna be otherwise too long, my speech. But he tells a story of these Italian workers and people that are called by this NGO in Zambia, in East Africa. These people go there and see a land that is full of opportunities, especially from a farming side. So they see a land that is ready to be farmed, and they don't understand why the local population is not farming, why they're starving if they have this amount of land. Maybe because they don't know how to do it. Since we know how to do it because we're better than them, we can teach them. So these Italians go there and start implementing the techniques that they know and start growing zucchini, tomatoes, aubergines. And the local population is not collaborating with them. So they're angry, and they think that they just probably don't want it. So probably they want to starve. They don't want to grow vegetables. They don't want to eat. But what happens is that a few days later, 200 hippos arrive at the land and eat everything that these farmers farmed.
Yeah.
And the local Zambian population looks at them and laughs and said, "We knew it. That's why we didn't do anything. That's why we didn't cooperate with you. It was just a waste of time. You didn't want to listen to us." And I think that it's a beautiful story that can maybe sum up what I hope I said before, and what I hope I just gave this message. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And Abenita, I actually agree completely. I always say that only if we join forces, public, private, and not-for-profit, locals, only if we join, exchange our views, or if we join forces together, then we can create a solution that actually fits it all. As the story just mentioned is a best example that yes, you cannot come somewhere you have no idea about the environment, culture, and lots of other things, and say and impose something that works somewhere in other parts of the world. Thank you so much. That was really incredible. Thank you for sharing your insights. I think we had a very good first round. And I'm happy to hear that, yes, actually, there are tools. We just need sometimes to dig deeper, to make an extra step, and nothing is impossible. What I would suggest, because I see we have already a couple of questions in chat, and the questions that I prepared, they can wait. I think the more important that we actually tackle the questions from our audience first, because also we're running short with time. So let me start. Tim, we have a question from you about how can companies strengthen internal ESG controls without losing agility in a crisis?
Brilliant question. There are 3 points I guess I'd make to this. Firstly, perfection is the enemy of progress. If we're waiting for everything to be 100% tickety-boo, absolutely perfect, we've missed the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is actually the culture and the governance around those controls to begin with. Are controls seen as a compliance exercise, or are they actually seen as a quality factor that will actually improve the outcomes for the organization? On a more practical level, I've actually got an ESG controls toolkit that you can download from my website. I'll put the link in the chat shortly. What I tend to do is I draw a 2x2 matrix where I'm assessing how important, how material is this topic on one axis, and then what is the risk of getting this wrong? If we get this wrong, how big an issue is it really? And really, you use that 2x2 grid to basically prioritize those controls to focus on now, those controls that you need that agility in, and then as you go down, which ones can you deprioritize or not even worry about? But agility is key, particularly because what I find, you look back through history, often the companies are more resilient than the governments themselves when in a particular war zone. So the important thing is to keep those controls there, but prioritize them based on risk and importance of the topic.
Thank you, Tim. In case anyone wants to add, you're welcome to jump into discussion. We have a question for Irina. Irina, how do you see Epicenter's role in shaping Ukraine's post-war green recovery? Because you're already quite active during the war. So what place you see for yourself after the post-war?
Thank you. It's a great question because we don't wait for the end for the war, yes, but do it now. If you say about post-war green recovery, I see in both in responsibility and in opportunity. And developers. And we are at a unique position to influence not just the rebuilding of infrastructure, but in remining of it through the lens of sustainability, resilience, and innovation. I see our role in several key dimensions. The first, I think, is sustainable construction and urban regeneration. We are commitment of rebuilding with future generation in mind, using energy efficient materials, green building technologies, and urban planning practices that promote well-being and reduce environment impact. The next, I see supporting local supply chains. As a biggest retailer, we work with more than 7,000 suppliers. By prioritizing Ukrainian manufacturers and sustainability sources, we help strengthen the domestic economy while minimizing the carbon footprint and logistics and imports. The next, I see the energy approach. With our investment in solar energy across logistics centers and our stores and shopping malls, Epicenter has actively contributed to the decentralization of energy system. And this now help us and our country. And I think this is our next step to do that after the war. Of course, as a retailer, we have a strong connection with our consumers, community in empowerment and education. We believe recovery starts with the people. That's why we are investing in education programs, green jobs, and awareness campaign to help communities become active participants in the transition to the low carbon economy. I think we can create a lot of new
I see you have a lot of plans.
Yes, yes, but I think there are a lot of questions in the chat I saw.
Yes.
Then,
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Irina. It's glad to see that you have a lot of plans for future. And
thank you.
I see here general question. What would you recommend for a bank in Europe, I guess for financial sector in general, measures that can help in strengthening the ESG mandate? I think that really in today's world, especially in financing sector, there's so many discussions and very controversial discussions about a role of ESG and sustainability. Someone is creating the whole team dedicated to them. In some places they create a team, but they're like, it's all really very questionable, all this impact investment, but it is not impact investment. Maybe any volunteers who would like to say, yes, good. Team, please.
Yeah, I've actually spent more time in financial services than I have in mining. I think the key thing with banks and insurers actually is really the due diligence on the loan portfolio, the due diligence on the investment portfolio. And for insurance, it's very much focused on the due diligence of the entities you're insuring. How deep are you going? When you get into the SME end of the market, the data is patchy, at least more patchy than it is with the larger corporates. But actually, what criteria are you using there? And I think it's important before you do that due diligence to actually take a step back and say, okay, and this is where the sustainable development goals come in really helpful, is actually saying which ones are important to us as a bank, as well as to our regulators, to our communities, and use that as a starting point to determine what due diligence you do, and then how deep and how far and how wide you go in doing that. Now, in the UK, the Bank of England has just reissued its guidance, or is now consulting on some very detailed criteria around climate risk for UK banks. I know the ECB has been imposing similar regulations across the Eurozone. Often, unfortunately, it seems to be regulation being the stick because the carrot isn't as effective as it could or should be. But really, it boils down to the quality of your due diligence. Is it a tick box exercise, or are you actually trying to get meaningful data that will actually drive and influence that decision making?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. That's actually a very good point. And I think there's two similar questions, and I think Benedetta, as this goes your way. So what one thing international donors or investors often overlook when funding projects in fragile regions? And yes, also like very similar is what role sustainability plays when it comes to foreign investors coming to fragile countries. Does sustainability play any role in decision-making process in this case?
Thank you. Okay, I can start replying to the first. So the things that international donors or investors often overlook. In my experience, I think that one thing is the cost and time of building trust. And this is really important. And this is a thing that if you start working and doing business in sub-Saharan regions, and me first when I started, I had no idea yet to take into consideration how building trust would cost me money and time, me talking about, of course, like entrepreneurs, companies. So this is for me the most important thing that international donors and investors overlook. And this links to what I was saying during my presentation. So we have countries that have a completely different history. So we can't think that as investors and as companies that want to make money, so want a return on our investment, we go there, we apply what we think is fair and what we think is the right way to do business. And then the population will adapt because they see our money. They see we are investors, so we are coming there with money. This is not enough. This is not enough because when you go there, and obviously I talk about countries that I know, so I couldn't say that this applies to any fragile economy or any underdeveloped or developed countries in development. But for sure in East and Southern Africa, so in Sub-Saharan Africa, you need to trust the tribes, the local tribes. Like in my job, we develop renewable energy projects mostly in Tanzania, in Zambia, in South Africa. And developing this kind of projects, you have a few things that you need to deal with. That is land ownership, that is relationship with governments and relationship with the owners of the land that sometimes are governments, sometimes are tribes of areas of Africa that we have no idea how they think and what they want. And their priorities are completely different to priorities of international investors that go there. And this, as I said before, takes time and money. So I have like dozens of examples that I could give on projects that were perfect on paper. So you saw the money, you saw the reliability of the investors, and you could really picture this project happening in that area, but they didn't go through. Why? because there were clearly issues locally, but the most important problem was that international donors and investors had no more patience or got scared about how the counterpart was negotiating. And this is why we need local consultants. Like, we don't need local consultants only in our countries. We need local consultants in any part of the world we deal with and we want to invest. It doesn't matter that we come with our beautiful bag of money, full of money. Probably this deal is never gonna, I see Tim not, it's not gonna go well, that deal. It doesn't matter how much money you bring. If you don't understand the culture, you will never be able to speak, even if you speak a common language. It's just not gonna happen. So you need to bear in mind as an international investor that building trust is gonna take time. So you need to put this time in your business model. You need to find a way to price it and to tell your investors that they need to spend this time and money on building trust and on knowing the local population. Otherwise, they're never gonna do anything. So this is for me I don't know who asked the question because I have no access to I haven't looked at it, but it's a very interesting question. So thank you for asking.
There's two questions related to this topic. We're really short in time, but I think we still have a couple of questions in chat. So maybe we do take them, if you don't mind. So we have one, what are the biggest misconceptions global actors have about implementing sustainability in fragile or conflict-affected regions? I think, Tim, and that's more from your field. If you could share some thoughts about that.
Sure. Shall I go first?
Of course.
I think that the biggest misconception, it's less of a misconception, it's more of a communication issue. Detta touched on that very well in the answer to the previous question. I think what I'd add to that is that we're currently in a very VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment. We've had a lot of uncertainty coming from the States in the sustainability field, particularly under the current Trump administration, with the collapse of US aid and that on the economy, plus all the uncertainty around tariffs and withdrawal of diversity, equity, inclusion, and other and climate-related policies as well. The misconception, people are questioning the science, which, you know, is lunacy itself, but then questioning actually what value am I as a big corporate going to get from this? And it's become more about what can I get from this than what can I give, what can I do to positively impact other parts of the world. So I think we're seeing the real misconception is shrinking the corporate time horizon. In the States, it's always been very short-termist anyway, but it's becoming increasingly short-termist rather than medium and long-termist. And I think that ultimately is what's rocking the foundations at the moment. But Benedetta, I'm sure you have a very unique perspective compared to me on that one.
I completely agree with you. And I think I can add just that another misconception that comes to my mind now is thinking that people don't care about sustainability, that people keep cutting trees because they don't care. It's not true. And I think that we need to change our perspective on this. So it's a misconception. Population in sub-Saharan Africa obviously cares about sustainability. But what is in our power, I think, is to, as I said before, redefine the concept of sustainability, so the meaning, but is also to understand that sustainability can mean different things, and we can get to the same goal. We can tackle the same goal with different meanings to sustainability. Because when basic needs are electricity, food, safety, and these needs are unmet, sustainability, it's obvious that sustainability becomes intertwined with survival. So if we just reimagine sustainability and give sustainability a different definition, I'm sure we can solve a lot of problems, especially on that part of the world.
No, I agree with you 100%. I used to do trainings for startups, and I was always starting with the phrase that, guys, sustainability, it's not about running around with a flag and say, hey, let's save the planet. It's actually about making you a lot of money, but by doing it in a smart, cautious, and clean way. Let's put it that way. Yes. We actually really running out of time, and I'm very sad from one side because I had also my questions to ask you guys. But I'm happy that we could have, so to say, a discussion and participation from the audience. Robin, I think we need to do it again. And to wrap up, I will put aside what I was planned. I like that we're improvising a little bit today. To finish our webinar today, to let's say not to finish, but maybe to pause our discussion on something interesting to think about for the next time, I would like to ask three of you actually one question. So if you could just recommend one action, is it a policy change and a mindset, awareness, practice, or whatever, to leaders working in a fragile or high-risk environments who want to embed sustainability meaningful, what would you recommend? And you really have 1 minute to answer. Tim, you started our today's session, so I suggest you start this
Sure.
round.
Cool. I won't take the full minute. I would just say now is the time to lean in, genuinely listen to the people on the front line, understand the risks from their perspective, because they will have a far better view of the situation than anyone in the middle of that communication chain.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I also wanted to add something that I think it was in your presentation, and I really liked. That was to promote transparency over regulation. I think that's a very important key. And also, I think that we didn't focus on, but I think it's super important, is to focus on capacity building and education, because that's really important. Without people, we're not going to save the world.
It's 100%. And your recommendation?
Thank you. I'm thinking about that and create a lot of way. For me, I think we now must think how we can rebuild ecosystems, economies, and communities stronger than before. And for me, it's mindset opens the door. Investing in local green jobs, not just reducing layoffs. Designing circular products, not just recycling more. Partnership with your display communities, not just using donation, and integrating renewable energy, not just offsetting carbon. It's for me, I think about huge, and I think it will be better, not only reducing something, but creating new approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are right on time, like a Swiss watch. Robin, you should be very proud of us. So thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much.
First, big thanks to our speakers. Thank you that I know that you're all very busy with your schedules, but you found time to join us today and to share your wisdom, share your insights, and we really appreciate a lot. Thank you for our audience who could be with us today. I know that many will watch later, so please follow unDavos. You can see in chat all the links, and also you can find our speakers from today on LinkedIn. If in case you didn't ask your question, I'm sure they will be very happy if you reach out to them LinkedIn or any other social media platform. And I hope that our meeting was meaningful and useful. I know that it was meaningful. I hope it was useful for many, and hopefully see you soon all again, and looking forward to unDavos in 2026 in person in Davos. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Victoria, Benedetta, Irina, and Tim. Give them a big applause. I'll deserve a virtual applause out there.
Thank you.
I'll just share. The session is over for today, but if you would like to host a webinar, feel free to apply here. And yeah, I think it was a really good idea, Victoria, to keep the conversation alive, maybe on LinkedIn posts, and to find a next conversation space somewhere. We can talk about that to keep it alive. Other than that, thanks so much for everyone showing up. I guess it's only us here now, actually. So thank you again to all of you and the panelists.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for
Thank
organizing.
you.
Catch you
Bye-bye.
later. Thank you, guys.
Catch
Cheers.
you later.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Okay, I'll stop recording here.